Okay, I am going to call the Capital Planning Committee meeting for Monday, December 6th, 2021 to order. It is 7:32 p.m. All voting members are present, and I see one ex officio, Mr. Ballantyne here. I believe Mark's going to join us at some point as well. The first item on our agenda is the approval of meeting minutes from November 15th of 2021. These were prepared in draft form by Karen. Are there any questions or comments for Karen?
The only thing I have is the spelling of my name. It looks like it's in a British style. There's an E on the end of it. It's on page 3.
I'll correct that. Sorry. The
No.
names.
No, I've never been to London either. So
Any other comments or questions? Great job, and thank you, Karen. So I will make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes with the one minor edit. Is there a second? Seconded by Jeff. Any further discussion? Okay. And Lisa, you good with your audio? I see it going in and out. You see her shaking her head. I'm gonna give her a minute before we do the roll call, if everyone's okay with that. All right, so I am gonna do a roll call vote. I see Lisa sent a chat saying my audio is not working and let me unmute. So Lisa, what I'll just ask you to do is why don't you write your vote on the minutes into this, and I'll just read it out loud. So we're voting on the minutes. It's been motioned in second. Roll call vote, Braccio. So voting aye. Hark.
aye.
Palmer.
Abstain.
Schoner.
I wasn't at that meeting. I don't know if you want me to vote.
You were at the meeting, I think.
Was I at, was that my first meeting?
It was.
I didn't notice my name. Well, then I approve. Sorry about that.
It's up top under voting members present. So, all right,
Sorry.
so we got aye there. Wheeler
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So I think we have 501 by my count. The next item on the agenda is chair member report. So after our last meeting, the school capital research subcommittee met, I believe it was a day or two later, and made some pretty important votes that are going to be formalized into a presentation to the school committee at their January meeting. The gist of the votes, because I don't have the actual text in front of me, are that there's basically going to be a proposed one path forward in terms of exploration of a new NERI in combination with a repurpose of the Woodward School. So you need kind of both parts to make that a whole, but that was a unanimous vote, which you have one capital planning member and myself, a advisory member and Kathy Cook, and a school committee member in Katura. Of course, it's a non-binding vote, it's a recommendation, but it's really the outcome of pretty much 18 months or so of study of different configurations, et cetera. We are putting the final touches on presentation with the intended audience would be the school committee, but we're also going to need to find a way to brief this full committee, the select board, and advisory. I mean, it has some far-ranging implications, like of how to advance the next steps. So that is coming in January, but really there was only one path forward. It's the superintendent's recommendation, it's the subcommittee's recommendation, and we feel like we have a final handle on the enrollment, and any questions that would come up related to the enrollment would not move the needle in any way, shape, or form on that recommendation. It also does take into account potential development that could occur in the town. There's obviously one project that's in litigation that did cause a lot of questions during our process, but it allows kind of a margin of error as well, and all of that as well. So it's being seen as obviously a pretty safe path forward too, of like, you can kind of be wrong and still get it right in a way, because you would leave yourself possibilities at Finn and other facilities. The big question that will come up is obviously cost. That's obviously still very, very early. But what I will say is you remember my last update in the last meeting, I gave an update around MSBA and that they would be coming back probably in and around the December timeframe. NERI was one of 11 statewide finalists. They came back to the superintendent after the subcommittee meeting to say that they would not be making a formal recommendation to the MSBA board, which is a public body that meets very similar to the way we meet, except far broader constituent base of all 351 cities and towns. But that won't be happening until March. There was a discussion at length on the subcommittee about whether the pros and cons of MSBA. So it was decided by the subcommittee to undertake an analysis with a firm, Vertex, who was actually the OPM on the public safety building, as well as recently did a assessment of the roof at NERI. So they're very familiar with the NERI process, just to do a kind of, it's more than a back of an envelope, but it's less than like a probable cost estimate of with and without MSBA, given that Southborough has one of the lowest reimbursement rates in the state, given just the demographics of the community. So that process is underway and should be completed in time for that school committee presentation as well. MSBA has informed the superintendent that they will give kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down of prior to that March meeting, their public meeting, because their application period for next year is basically already about to open. So the school needs to know whether they're going to have to resubmit an application or not. So they're going to get kind of a heads up there. But I think the broader question is, if MSBA calls and says you're in, the town needs to be able to say, and this is beyond the school committee, I believe the select board would be involved as well, whether we want to be in. And right, because then you're following someone else's timeline. And I think what we're going to hear, obviously, with some of the members of the COA that are going to be joining us shortly, is timing is going to be important to like some of these other constituent groups that may or may not benefit from a community center type concept if Woodward was to be repurposed. So there's a lot there. A lot more presentations to come. It's going to be a pretty robust presentation of the journey we've taken, but as someone that's kind of been living it for the better part of that 18 months, it's nice to be able to kind of see some decisions being made in a clearer path, because I know a lot of people have been patient, and I just want to applaud not only the schools, but all the groups that have been waiting for it. It's obviously been probably the most difficult year to try to undertake an analysis, given all the distractions that COVID and alike have presented. But I do think we are on a path here to making some recommendations, and it'll obviously be up to the town for further analysis, further public feedback, and potentially some sort of article coming in the spring. I think probably not part of the annual town meeting, probably a special town meeting type item, depending on where we decide to go as a community, and in what the vetting and these other stakeholder groups, kind of provide as part of that. So pause there and just see if there's any questions related to that. Okay, Joe, I'm going to skip the Shopsy South Union subcommittee update for 2 seconds, because the next agenda, the item 5 related to space needs study status and next steps, is interrelated to everything I just said. So I want to go there, and then I'll come back to you, and then we'll go to COA, because we need to kind of go in that order to make the COA conversation relevant. So the other thing that's been happening, as you recall, we kind of got an initial download from DRA and Ken and Courtney in terms of their preliminary analysis. That was a few months ago at this point. I remember, Tony, that was definitely prior to you joining us, and we'll want to make sure you're up to speed on that. But as you remember, as the MSBA conversations advanced, one of the things MSBA was very focused on was how you would repurpose Woodward if that was the chosen school, if they did choose to consolidate in any way, shape, or form with a new NERI. And one of the things they asked about is what we want to see, basically a plan of how it would be reused, because what MSBA looks for in their projects, at least based on what we were told, is level of community support behind a project, i.e. you don't have one small group trying to push a project forward, that you've gotten buy-in from a lot of stakeholders, and that obviously you're not going to shut a 20-year-old school and not repurpose it into something of significant meaning to the community. So the superintendent authorized kind of us to continue working and take obviously our existing contract with DRA and to use that to see what could be done and make sure we weren't wasting all this time thinking about Woodward and find that it didn't meet the needs of all these constituent groups. I think the punchline is we're going to be good. They're going to come back and make a presentation to us of what is the possible and how that would look. What will happen, not in a public meeting to start, is the department heads of each of the respective departments that would potentially be impacted by adjacencies will be given a chance, and if they're supported by an elected or appointed board, one member there, just to preview and say, this is the worst idea I've ever seen or the best idea, so that our design team has some feedback before they present it on a grander scale. So that will be happening pretty imminently here. And it obviously impacts a far-ranging group of departments. So it's going to be a fun scheduling exercise, I think, but trying to group some groups together just so that they can at least give some initial reactions. It's obviously incredibly preliminary. And I think we're going to have to make sure that that is stressed in any way, shape, or form. But it shows a vision for what could happen if all of kind of the stars align. And I think, Ken and Courtney are obviously looking to finish up their scope of work too. I think any of us that are in the consulting field can appreciate working on a fixed fee. The longer something drags out, they're obvious have been great and supportive of kind of following our timeline and being ready for us. So they've been great. They've asked Mark and myself a few questions recently just to make sure they were on the right track. But I think the next barometer test is going to be letting some of the users of potential space just weigh in where they'd like to go. So Mark, I don't know if you add anything related to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think that again, it's going to be looking at this on a broad scale and trying to manage, I think, some of the questions that are going to come from departments about detail that isn't there yet. And so that I think that's going to be the challenge of the discussion.
Any questions from the committee? Okay, Joe, I'm going to go back to you and see if you have any updates under 3B Shopsy South Union Subcommittee update.
Yes, the last meeting we were just, Jesse Stein gave a presentation on, he looked into the zoning of the property, and the zoning would seem to meet some of the initial ideas that have been proposed sort of in the size and scope of the development for the property. So that was good to know. The next meeting on the 16th, I've gotten the president of the Mass Home Builders Association to come in, and I believe he's going to bring in possibly an architect as well as an engineer to help us sort of mull over different type of development options that might be possible on the property, and some things that they may see, both benefits and detractions for us in moving forward doing certain types of developments. So hopefully that all goes to plan, and it'll be a really fun meeting to be at.
And I assume someone is keeping abreast of everything that's coming out of the state level ARPA funding. I know it hasn't been voted yet.
In terms of relating to the property itself, or the redevelopment, or affordable
Just
housing,
the affordable housing components of it.
I don't think that we necessarily have gotten that far into how that would play into it. I had conversations with the state person in the state agency about the different types of funding that were available in the buckets. How ARPA is going to affect all those buckets, I don't know, and I haven't called again. But as far as moving forward, where we are, I think what we as a committee are looking to do is to make a document proposal to the selectmen endorsing a project if we think it's possible and viable. I don't think that we are going to specifically propose all the proponents of it, knowing that the process for this is going to be that the property is going to have to go through the town to get approval for just doing a type of project, let alone the project itself. So I think we're not necessarily, I certainly will put that to committee that we should be looking into it. But I think at the moment we're focused on just getting the possibilities of what could be done on the property done, let alone trying to fund it just yet, because there are a whole lot of buckets to fund it out of.
And have you guys come up with a timeline yet, or still too preliminary?
A timeline for the actual project to be,
Or just that recommendation you said you may have for the select board?
I don't think we have a final due date yet, but I wouldn't expect us to run much past first couple weeks of February. I think at that point we should have all the information we need to put a proposal to the selectmen whether we believe that a project is viable there.
So I don't know who's on what email chains these days or email list, Mark, that you have, but Joe, I believe the select board is closing the warrant for the annual town meeting in the beginning of January, or is it the end of December, Mark?
Selectmen's meeting schedule got a little haphazard for December. So we're meeting tomorrow night. And we're supposed to meet the 21st. We're looking at meeting the 14th instead. And so that's a little up in the air. We're supposed to close the warrant December 21st, but we'll instead close at the first meeting in January, which I believe is January 4th. That's a good news for some people that have more time. But for those people who are just putting in placeholders, and by placeholder, I mean an idea, this is something I think we'd like to do. You have got roughly 4 weeks to get me final language. So the good news is you got a little extra time. Bad news is you got to get final language so we can get council time to review and everything before we have to go to print.
So Joe, I'll forward you the email just so you have it, but I would take it to your committee and make sure that if you think you need a placeholder, you let Mark know. If you don't think you need a placeholder, I get you're going to be bordering right up against that deadline. So I'll leave that to you.
I think the way I would phrase this right at the moment would be that no matter what comes out of this committee, I think what would be needed is at least an endorsement from the town at the town meeting that this is an avenue that the town is willing to accept. Because we're not going to, the project itself will have to take many forms and probably have to go through at least 2 rounds to get funded by a lot of the affordable housing buckets, is what I was told. That pretty much when you submit to the state for affordable housing, usually the first time you're just summarily dismissed. But the idea is that you give them an idea that you're on the map by doing so. So you don't have to have a project fully finished to submit. But he said, I was told, look, if you're 85% good on what you're doing, submit, and then get rejected the first time so that everybody remembers you and knows it's coming the second time. And when your proposal is slightly more filled out, it'll be taken very more seriously, and you'll probably get the funding that you want. So at least in this process that we're looking at, we're probably looking at multiple year process to begin with. So in terms of what might come out, what might be advantageous from this annual meeting would merely just be an endorsement by the town to move forward in the direction that we're moving. Because if there's no appetite for an affordable housing at all on that property, then we have a problem moving forward regardless.
Okay.
Lisa, did you catch all of that?
I did. Thank you, Joe.
And as far as the Board of Selectmen, what would be the appetite for putting something in the warrant to that effect?
So I think, Joe, when you guys have a path forward, you would have your subcommittee would go to Shopsy, and or Shopsy would come to the Board of Selectmen with the presentation of what your findings are. And then obviously Shopsy can't sponsor the article. It would have to be a Board of Selectmen sponsored article, correct, Mark?
Yeah, that's correct. It seems like what Joe is saying is it's almost like you kind of want a non-binding resolution, to get a sense of, you put your finger up in the air and see if the wind's blowing the way you want it to on that type of proposal, then you can begin to move in that direction. So I think, you could structure something like that if that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that as, it's one thing to give a proposal and get, full proposal and get an approval for that. But just to get into the door, I think as far as the committees and the town's concerned, getting that parcel freed up with permission to investigate this, to have all the work done, I think is something that would be a step forward in terms of this process. And it would clear us to do a whole bunch. We could clear a whole bunch of hurdles. And maybe even apply for things under that without any binding project that would be a problem. Do you know what I mean? So we could submit for that first round of funding without actually, having to commit to a full-blown project that has to be approved by the town. So we could go to the next meeting and say, we have a project, it has these components to it. We've already been told that, we might get funding the next time around. So, the people in the town will know that what the kind of funding that we can get for it. Because if we go in with a proposal that doesn't have any backing and doesn't have funding yet, or doesn't even have proposals for funding or any sorts of elements to it, people are going to be less likely to commit to it. And as I see it, given the past that I've seen in town meetings, without a decent proposal with some sort of additional backing for funding and other components to it, I just don't see people biting on it. So I think as far as, at least this is just an opinion, as far as the process goes, I can't speak for everybody else in the committee, but as far as the process goes, I feel that getting a initial nod from the town that it's willing to accept this direction as a possibility for the property puts us one step forward and gets us, into the door to say to all these other funding elements, we already have permission from the town to look into this. We're anticipating that we're going to get support for a good project when we go through all the steps of approval from all the boards and town members and buy-ins. And that will help certainly in getting certain types of funding.
So Mark, does it make sense to invite the subcommittee to come to our meeting on the 4th to discuss whether the board wants to potentially put a placeholder based on any information they can provide us going into town meeting, or at least start the discussion on where we want to go with this and what's going to be required to bring it forth? I don't know if there's enough information to even bring it forth. So does that make sense, Mark, to
Well, I think the subcommittee could submit a request for a placeholder to the selectmen, and whether you take it up on the 4th or you take it up at a meeting somewhere there shortly thereafter, I think that one of the questions I would have is whether or not there's going to be any funding attached to this for any, for you to have to go and explore things, even though it's I hate to say a non-binding resolution, but you kind of get the sense of town meeting. We're about to enter potentially a multi-year process on this. We don't want to go 18 months down the road and find out, we really didn't want to do that. So, but if town meeting is willing to commit a little bit of funding for you to help with this exploratory, that's usually as much of an assent, as you can get, that you're given a little bit of a green light to move forward in that direction. So that's just a thought. I didn't know whether that was going to come as part of your thought process but that usually gives you as much understanding as whether they want to do it or not.
I don't want to go too any much
So
farther.
I'm gonna move on from this.
I just want to add one point. Like, for instance, CDAC has grants for seed money for feasibility for these types of properties. And so having an approval, say, from the town at a town meeting, you could forward that in a proposal to them saying, look, our town is looking and willing. So getting some funding to do this makes sense.
All right, Jason,
That's all I'm kind of saying.
thank you. I think we'll have a discussion, Mark, with the subcommittee offline on this. So Jason can move forward. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks.
All right, so I've started to move members of the Council on Aging in. We have Doug, Bill, and our COA Director, Pam. I'm going to tee up the conversation, then I'm going to give them the floor. I've probably been having conversations with Bill, who was chair before Doug, about their senior center renovation plans. I know it came before capital last year. It got pushed back due to the lack of availability of Assabet. We now know that Assabet's still not going to be available until another year out from a fiscal year perspective. To do anything to Corderville Hall, you all heard what I'll call my pretty long-winded explanation of where we're at on the space needs study and the school slash situation in terms of more of a community center. But I offered Bill and Doug the opportunity to come and speak to what they had originally planned at Corderville and let the whole committee hear what they're thinking. They've been brought up to speed offline prior to this meeting of basically the update I gave to all of you as well. They've also had a chance to make sure that our design team that's working on space needs has taken into account not only what they were looking to do at Corderville, but really what the right space needs are for a senior center, whether it be as part of a community center or standalone. And those conversations are ongoing, but they have kind of a link there too. So what I wanted to do is just give them the floor to walk through anything that was on their minds. Because as you know, we are going to be voting on recommendations tonight for what we want to pass along to advisory and the select board for placeholders for capital for the 2022 annual town meeting. And nothing there is related to Corderville Hall right now, just based on the timing of Assabet. But that also doesn't mean that something couldn't come up in the fall. Obviously, if we choose to change that tonight, we certainly can. But that's really what I wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page about, given especially those that have been on capital planning since the beginning. I think there was a large amount of support for what Council on Aging was looking to do from a practical perspective. It was just how best to achieve it and make sure we weren't band-aiding it. And obviously, the use of Assabet has been kind of the timing issue that's been here all along. So with that, Bill, Doug, I don't know which one of you is planning to speak or if you want to address the committee, but I'll give you the floor.
I'll pick up, I guess, Doug, unless you want to say something first. Since he's not saying anything.
No, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Bill. I think you have the more detailed information and knowledge probably right at your fingers as well. So go ahead and I'll jump in when I have to.
All right. We're happy to be back and just to remind you that we're still out there. And although we hear all the good news about a possible community center, we still feel that the need for more activity space at the senior center is a very pressing, at Carterville Hall, is a very pressing issue. And we just want to keep the pressure on, if that's what you want to say, that we really would like to see the activity area added to our senior center. Changes have come as far as funding is concerned. When we talked a year or so ago, it was really a pretty tight budget because of the fact that Facilities wanted to spend a lot of the available funds, and available funds are a result of how much we can do to Carterville Hall before we run into ADA issues, and then we have to rebuild Carterville Hall because we're spending too much money on the remodel. As I think you all know about that. So right now, facilities no longer wants to do a very large project on the exterior of the building. John plans to utilize his staff to do what needs to be done to the outside of the building, which takes the pressure off as far as funding if we want to do our additional activity area. So we feel good about that. What else I wanted to, I was curious, one of the things, I wonder if the ARPA funds might be available for this as to fund the cost of this renovation. That's just something maybe you guys would know, which look into. Right now, if we go ahead with the renovation project, as I see it, it could be done by September of 2024. As Jason said, we still want to use Assabet. There's a lot of advantages to using the Assabet kids. It saves us a lot of money. It's a golden opportunity for these kids to do a really good project. And it becomes an intergenerational project. The kids are building something for the seniors, which is not all bad. So if we followed what I see as a possible timeline for this, if we could get approval at the September 22 town meeting, the fall town meeting, which seems to be where capital projects seem to fall, then that would give us that winter to prepare construction drawings and do that. Then in May through September 23, we could start doing excavation, foundation, rough stuff, because the kids at the present time could start on the September 23, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done before they come in, because they're going to do basic wood construction, but we need to have a foundation, we need to have rough plumbing and heating and all that in by the September, so they can come and the project would be ready for them to do what they do best, which is the actual construction of the facility. And then I talked to John, and he wasn't 100% sure, but he felt that they could get the project done if we were ready for them in September by the time they finish the school year in June, which would give us the summertime to get it fitted out and ready to occupation in the fall of September 2024, which is what the best we can see right now to put that project together. And that seems to have a more definite final deadline than the community center at the moment, which is still pretty much up in the air, although it seems to be gelling a little bit. The more I hear, the more I get optimistic about that, as town certainly could use a community center. So that's kind of bringing you up to date where we are at the moment, and we still want to be in the forefront with you guys, and look for your support. Doug, did you want to say anything?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. I mean, I think Jason presented, gave us a very clear picture of the community center and some basic timelines. You know, our concern is not the community center per se. It's just, you know, if this is going to be a 7 or 8 year project to get really all done, then it's a big concern for us, because, you know, we've been waiting to do something for our senior center for a long time now. That really needs to be done. We're continuing to serve more and more seniors, and it's becoming more difficult. we're in an aging population. People don't want to leave Southborough that are in Southborough, but they're getting older. They require more services. They require more help. They require a number of different things that we simply cannot provide right now. And if we're looking 5 or 6 years down the road or more, it even becomes more complicated. And we just think we're doing a disservice to our seniors. I mean, I forget the exact number of seniors in the town right now, but it's probably close to, we service almost 1,000 seniors a year. So that's a lot of people, even when you look at what the school is serving. And we just don't get a lot of funding. We just don't have the space that we need to really be able to do it well. The people are passing in and out. But one of the things that COVID has showed us is that the isolation that has been imposed on a lot of seniors has really had a disastrous effect. They're very hard to bounce back when you've been isolated like that, particularly for a long length of time. And we just don't want to see that happen again. We need to bring them into a space that is adequate, that is safe for them, where they can socialize. It's really, really important to their physical health and to their mental health.
Do you have any questions for us, Jason?
Let me just summarize it, and then I'm just going to go around the horn just to make sure everyone's on the same page. I think this is a really important topic that we, at least I'm committed to keep top of mind. Is you're looking for no action from us in the spring of 2021, given Assabet's construction timeline.
Mhm.
You are asking for potential spring of 2022. You are not looking for anything. I saw a lot of puzzled looks looking at me. In the fall of 2022, you're asking for potential consideration for doing the project you had originally planned at Corderville. However, I assume would acknowledge that by then, we're definitely going to know where we're going one way or another on the school, and are cautioning us on, the lack of a desire to wait 8 or 9 years when you've probably already been waiting twice that amount of time is my guess, to begin with. But obviously, if something materializes related to more of a community center concept, we'll revisit it before any action would be needed in the fall of 2022. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I'm not gonna go around the horn, but just open it up to the committee if there are any questions while we have Doug and Bill.
I guess, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Jeff.
So how much risk is there to Assabet's timing? I mean, they've pushed us back a couple of times now. Is that a pretty firm date at this point?
As I understand it, yes. They have a project which is ahead of us in their queue, which is the Public Works building in Northborough. And then we are in the queue to be the next big project on their agenda. So as far as I know, and I've talked to John, we are still in that queue and still number 2. So of course, COVID has put them back a whole year as far as what they're concerned, but I believe we're still, based on what I heard from John Parent, though that date is still good.
Yeah, I mean, COVID could set us back a year. That's just a big variable that no one knows what's going to happen. Hopefully not. But I think we'll also know by the spring, what happens in the winter. After all the holidays have gone by, are we going to be trending up or trending down? What's going on with the new variant? But I don't think there's an appetite to shut things down, or at least not right now, that there was in the past. I mean, none of the mayors or anybody seems to want to really shut the schools down, go to Zoom, and really change everything again. So it'd have to be pretty drastic, I think, to really make big changes, but it certainly could happen.
I do have one follow-on question, and maybe this is more for John, Jason, I'm not sure, but the quote we got was about 18 months ago, right? And costs have certainly risen over the last 18 months as it relates to, you know, materials and all the like to construct this new wing or this new part of the building. So has that been updated or considered? Because I just want to make sure that doesn't trip us
It
up.
was considered. I asked John that very question. I said, when he verified that we were still in the queue and all that, he asked if there was any requote, and the response to that was, it's 2 years out almost, and the volatility of construction materials and so forth right now, any number they gave us at this point would be pretty much a real guess rather than anything that was you could hang your hat on. So we're kind of living with the fact that it's in the ballpark of where we've been talking all along, and hopefully it doesn't get too much blown out of the water with all the issues with construction material at this point.
The other thing besides not having to do the exterior is we've had a new bathroom installed as well while we were on break. And that was, again, a major cost situation, something that had to be done, but that's done as well. So you can take that off the cost schedule, and hopefully that begins to balance some things out.
Yeah, we really appreciate what John did for us on that. He jumped in and had his crew put us, we didn't get the big bathroom, double, triple bathroom that we had hoped for, but we got what we really need, which is one additional bathroom. And he had his crew do it on their time. So that was a real plus for us. So that took the cost of that out of the big project as well.
So I'll go to Karen next.
Yeah, so what is the cost of the project? And the second question is, how does the Assabet arrangement work? Do we pay Assabet for that, or do they give those services for free?
We pay them, and they gave us a quote for doing the job, and the total job is in the vicinity of $200,000 for the addition. And
So 200,000 for Assabet's work, and what's
No,
for the whole thing?
that includes a lot of other things besides.
Yeah,
Assabet.
let me, so John Parent, just so we're all on the same page, we're gonna go by the official capital plan. John Parent and his facilities budget related to this project is carrying 325,000 for the renovation, including various systems that would need to be upgraded as part of that. And he's also carrying 175,000 to deal with certain siding and windows that are unrelated to necessarily what the COA is looking for, but related to just the maintenance of the building. And in addition, so that's part of like the broader plan. Assabet would do some of that, and they would obviously have to hire third-party labor. We're carrying that right now as an item that won't be considered for the spring town meeting, but could be up for reconsideration as soon as the fall. So it's not included in any budget analysis for the FY23 yet, and likely wouldn't hit because you'd bond it anyways. In FY23, it'd be probably, you may approve it for FY23, but it wouldn't hit till later. Now, that's not to be confused with what capital will discuss later tonight, is there's just some maintenance that John thinks cannot wait for anyone, and that he needs to deal with on his own, with his own team, That is approximately 25,000, and it also relates to siding and painting on the building. So don't want anyone to get confused, but there are a few components. Bill and Doug are really advocating, I think, for the addition and the additional space, but John also believes that there's stuff that just needs to be done to the buildings. Hopefully that answers, Karen, your question about the cost.
Yeah, thanks, Jason and Bill.
And your question was answered on Assabet too, Karen?
Yes, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. So Mark, I think this is more of a question for you, or, and I should remember the answer to this, but I don't. When we were talking about what the trigger was, the dollar figure trigger based on the assessment was, I can't remember if it was a percentage or what the dollar figure was that would trigger the ADA compliance on the building. Do you remember off the top of your head, Mark or Jason, what that was?
So Off the top of my head, it has to do with a certain percentage of the assessed value. I'm not sure if it was 30%.
It was- Mark, I have the numbers that we had a couple of years ago when we started all this. It was 30%, just like you say, for an ADA cap. And the value of the building at the time was about $1.3 million. So that gives you an idea of 30% of $1.3 million.
Thank you, Bill.
Lisa, the one thing to keep in mind though, it's not simply just the value of that particular project. It's projects based on a number of years. So if I forget if it was 2 years, or 3 years. So you've got to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I think it's 3 years. Yeah.
3 years, yeah.
And the only reason I asked that is I think we need to keep that in the forefront, as we go forward, and the numbers may change, that, we make sure we stay underneath that trigger, on whatever we decide going forward. So thank you. Thank you for refreshing my memory on that. That's it, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, and Lisa, I'll just add one thing on is, when I was going line by line with John, he did point out that he thought that, based on some discussions he had had with the building commissioner, that they were gonna, regardless of if you did all in everything, he thought they were gonna be fine based on the nature and scope of some of it. So he had done some additional diligence beyond, I think, what I remember was floating around, which is probably what Bill was looking at a few years ago. So, Doug and Bill, I guess I'll leave you with kind of my parting words is, I feel like we have to do something, and we have to do something soon. But I think we can do better than what we're talking about at Porterville. And that's what I remain passionate about trying to do. I find it ironic. We're talking about an ADA, trying not to hit the ADA limit when we're dealing with a facility that likely probably needs it the most. Not that any facility doesn't need it. But so I feel like that candidly is why I've been passionate about the larger project, not because I want to have a larger tax bill, but because I think there's a one-time chance here to do something that's meaningful. So that's just my vote in view of where I at least plan to go. But hopefully others share that same view.
Well, we like that you want to do better for sure. I think we like the whole idea of it. It simply just comes down to the timing of it.
Understood.
For us, and we also think that given if something should really, go off the rails, we also think giving a one-time use of this would be, using federal money that's available right now. It's a good way to use that money because now you're building something. It's not something that has no reoccurring cost associated with it, as opposed to giving raises or doing what other things with the money. This is all right. We're going to spend $350,000 of this or whatever, build it in, and it's done. And I think it's a good use of the money should it come to that. But that will just, time will tell.
Can I make a suggestion, Jason?
Go ahead.
So Doug, I would suggest that the ARPA committee is certainly going to be entertaining a lot of different proposals, but I would certainly encourage you to put something together and submit to the ARPA committee, for suggestions on this, and be available to talk to them about this as well. So absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And I think Bill and I can do that because we've got a lot of the numbers.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yep.
Thank you, Jason, very much for giving us a chance to address you guys. We really appreciate your time and
yep.
And
we will not forget you guys.
Okay, we appreciate that. And
we know where you live, Jason, or work.
And hopefully
we're happy to come anytime. You know where to find us.
And Bill, I will add as a
grand scheme. That would be
yeah.
And Bill, I'll add as a parting words to you. I certainly think that your background is very pertinent to the discussion today of your video.
Any other comments or questions?
It wasn't an accident.
Any other comments or questions for Bill and Doug before we let them go?
Thank you again.
Okay. We're gonna
Thank
go
you
watch
both.
the game.
Yeah, enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So our next agenda item is, we've already done 5, so we're going to go to 6. The ARPA committee vote on 2 capital planning members to recommend for appointment. This is on the select board agenda for tomorrow night. I have the charge that was sent over by Mark to the committee a week or so ago. It's in our packet. We discussed it briefly at the last meeting that this would be coming. We have 2 spots. You saw the rest of the composition. There's 6 of us. Lisa, I assume you are not looking to be appointed, given that you're ultimately going to be a decision maker.
I cannot be appointed. Thank you.
Okay, so that leaves 2 out of 5 of us that need to serve on this. So I will open the floor to see if there's anyone that has a burning desire to do it.
I burn. I'd love to do it.
Jason?
Yes.
So I would do this, but I certainly don't want to get in the way of anyone who's been on the committee longer if they wanted to. So, I would defer to anyone else.
Jeff, Karen?
I'd love for you to get involved, Tony. I'm okay with that.
I burn, but I'm fearful of the time commitment, and also I haven't been involved as long as some of the other people, and so would defer to other people who have more experience than myself. But if I'm needed, I'd be happy to do it.
Okay. Lisa, any comments as the appointing authority?
No, I just thank anyone that offers to step forward. I think this is a pretty amazing opportunity for all of us, as taxpayers. I mean, you're paying for it ultimately anyway, but as the ARPA is set up, the Board of Selectmen have the purview over how these monies are spent. And it's very important to us that we open this up to the public, because ultimately, again, it's your tax dollars and how it's spent, and the best way that it can be spent in the most inclusive way, and I think this committee's, really important. We have 2 citizens at large that are going to sit on this as well, that will bring a different perspective. Their perspective not necessarily is going to be from a capital standpoint, or, looking for a field or whatnot. They're going to bring a new, fresh perspective to this as well. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us all to, to try to find what the path, the best path on this may be. So I thank anyone that has offered to step forward or has the time to step forward, because I think there's tremendous value to all the taxpayers for doing this. So thank you. That's it.
Jason, what's your interest in? Are you burning to be on it?
Burning would not be the right word. The only reason I would entertain doing it, just to be completely honest, is I didn't hear the conversation, Lisa, of why you all decided on 2 capital planning members, but I would think that, and I can do this as a presenter at a meeting. It doesn't have to be as a member. Someone that understands how we've come to where we're at on the capital. And I've already heard conversation and advisory related to the school project and how that factors into this, and the community center. We just heard it with Council on Aging. So while I don't have a burning desire, I wouldn't necessarily refuse it. But I would say that if you and Tony are very interested in doing it, then we should do a nomination for you, and I can always come and be a guest presenter of the background of how we've gotten to this point on capital, and you can almost be more of an independent view of how to bring it forward. So that's my view.
Well, I think in terms of, if I was putting myself forward, I want everybody to know the reason why. And the reason why I is, when I look at these funds, I'm looking at the situation that we're in and thinking that I would like a good portion or chunk of these funds to go into projects and capital items that we're going to end up paying for regardless, because at least then that puts us in a better tax position moving forward, and we can decide on spending, other funds of ours later, but sort of bring down the burden first, and then we can sort of reset and decide how much we really want to spend moving forward. Not that certain projects aren't fabulous to present and put on, but I think from being on this committee and all of us here have been put in the position of trying to bring down the burden right up front to sort of level the curve. And I think that this money presents a great opportunity to take a good portion of it and do better and do more with it to bring down the burden. And then we can move forward with a new perspective on the capital items that we're going to have to do moving forward.
And Jason, can I just add something to what Joe said too? It was
Right.
one of the reasons why capital members were added was obviously projects over the $10,000 threshold, have capital review anyway. But with the ARPA money, I know one of the considerations that we had talked about is it's ripe and prime for one-time projects versus actually putting it towards something that's going to actually give you a tax burden further down the road, So knowing that it was geared towards that was one of the reasons it wasn't very supportive of two capital members being on it, because I think capital is going to have, no matter what project and no matter where we go, capital is going to be involved in it. So.
And Joe, I will second everything you said. I believe in that philosophy from the get-go. Obviously, any member needs to keep an open mind of what comes forward, but I think we're in a tough situation budget-wise, and anything that was already planned, just a nice way to alleviate some of the stuff.
I think I hope everybody looks at it at least a little bit that way.
So I'll add the third voice to that. I mean, this is a one-time opportunity. So it seems like we should use these funds on things that are unique one-time costs for us.
Okay, so I'm hearing Joe and Tony are interested. Is that correct?
Karen was burning a little too, if I remember correctly. It's like
So
she's
Karen, I
simmering.
will add-
She's at the bottom of my screen, but she's simmering.
It's too slow a burn.
Okay.
I don't want to step on your toes in any way, Karen, here. Not in any
Oh, no. I totally would be pleased if the two of you did it. I think that would be great.
All right, then I'm going to move that we recommend to the select board that they appoint Joe Palmer and Tony Schoner as the capital planning representatives to the ARPA committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Yep.
Seconded by
Oh.
Jeff. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, go ahead. I said I think I was jumping into second, but I think Jeff
Okay.
beat me.
All right, roll
Joe
call.
next up.
Braccio.
I'm going to abstain, Jason, because I'm going to vote on the Board of Selectmen side.
Okay. Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Schoner.
Yes.
Wheeler.
Aye.
And Malinowski's aye. So that's 501. Okay. Thank you both. I think you may get appointed as soon as next tonight. And my understanding is the pretty short timeline to turn around, as you probably saw on the chart. So best of luck and thank you on behalf of the committee.
Jason, can I just say one thing
Yes.
quickly? So again, I just want to thank you both, and you're going to have a great opportunity to work with, some standing committees and some really great people. So this is going to be a great collaborative effort, and I think everybody will gain from it. So that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Next item 7, capital planning standing committee bylaw. Vote and recommended language for proposed bylaw for the 2022 annual town meeting. We discussed and reviewed the changes at the last meeting. I asked everyone to digest it one more time before we took an official vote. Jeff did point out one minor typo. There was just a stray "and" somewhere in the document, so that's been removed. And otherwise, the language that was discussed with, I think, no feedback at the last meeting is now in front of us. If we are to vote yes tonight, this would be the language to get sent to the select board for their comments. I assume, Lisa, you'd want us to come probably talk through it, given the discussion last year. And then ultimately it's up to them whether this is the exact language they put in the warrant or they tweak it in any way, shape, or form. And as part of our advisory meeting, when we meet jointly with them, this would be naturally a topic that would come up, and we, get any feedback from them, so that if it is feedback that we're in favor of, and or the select board are in favor of, it makes it to the final warrant, which as Mark noted, the actual true language needs to be done early February. We'll have a placeholder already. That's the easy part. So I guess, does anyone have any other questions or comments? All right, then I'll move to the Capital Planning Committee support the proposed language for the CIPC bylaw to be presented to the select board for inclusion in the 2022 annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any further conversation? Okay, roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Park. I saw your mouth move. I didn't hear anything.
Aye. Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Yes.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. So that one is unanimous. All right. Let's go to 8, 2022 town meeting warrant capital items. I'm gonna ask Jeff to bring up on the screen the document that was included in the packets with the items that we'll be voting on.
Yeah.
If anyone was observant and did any track changes, you may have noticed this, this has changed. And it's really come at the recommendation of some department heads. So just so everyone understands the process, we've all now met with each of the department heads once. Jeff, you just went off, you went to the Word document.
Sorry.
Okay. I don't know if there's a way for you. We all met with the department heads once, and they presented their items for inclusion in the capital plan for this year. They all had submitted their forms. And what I did in preparation for the meeting was I sent each department head a summary of what we were carrying for them as a result of those conversations. And I asked them the following questions. I asked them to confirm that no items need to be added or deleted for FY23, that no items needed to be adjusted based on any known cost changes. And I said, if applicable, please identify any items that may be offset at a later date from other funding sources, i.e. grants, donations, etc. And then I said, if there are any must-haves, non-negotiables, or any priority metrics that you'd like to see assigned to these, we'd welcome to any feedback on that. So as we go to each department, what I'm going to do, because some naturally just picked up the phone and called me, some there was some back and forth on, so it was impossible to kind of collate it. What I thought I would do is, as we get to each department, kind of tell you what the department head changed as part of their presentation since we last saw them. Does that work for everyone? And then we'll vote on each department either by item or collectively based on where the committee is. So for the DPW, these are the following changes. When Karen came to us, she was originally at 70,000 for the Northborough Road culvert. She then, on a whim in the meeting, said it was 90,000. And then subsequent to that, actually got a probable cause estimate, like basically from an engineering firm, what it's going to take, and that's now 108,000. So if you remember the discussion in the last meeting, 70,000 is earmarked in the the bill that's on the governor's desk for signature. So assuming that isn't changed in any way, shape, or form before signed into law, we would have 70,000 from the state for that. And the town would need to make up the delta here through some sort of appropriation. I would say this number is highly subject to change because Karen would actually be able to hopefully bid it before annual town meeting. So this is one of those, I think we're going to carry this number if we think this is a good project, pending a final bid, and hopefully that bid comes in before town meeting, and hopefully it's a lower number that we can just reduce probably after the warrant being printed. Any questions on that? Okay. The utility dump highway is in here for 95,000. The mini excavator was updated to be 115,000. I believe that was actually a reduction from what we had previously seen. And you can note that the new pivot table format really shows the funding source. So because this is used by for both water operations and just general town operations, that's why it's split between the general fund and the water fund. Now, before I get to Newton Street, there are two items that are noticeably missing here right now. And that is the historic road maintenance item, which we've funded at 325,000 last year, and was scheduled to be 400,000, and sidewalk maintenance of 200,000. Sidewalk maintenance had never been in there. I think we've heard many times about it. The decision was made, or at least I'll call it recommendation, was made by Mark, Brian, and Karen as they looked at what the DPW has in front of them from just an actual construction schedule. There's very minimal capacity to be able to undertake a project of any size for next year. And or there's discussions, obviously, that the ARPA committee will likely have on this particular topic in terms of, I think in particular on sidewalks, you'll likely see something. But also, we talked a little bit with Karen in obviously Karen Wheeler here graciously volunteered to try to start to see what she could drum up with Karen Galligan in terms of a broader plan. So I think the thought with the road and sidewalk maintenance is to defer any consideration of that at the annual town meeting, because it would be funds that would be allocating that would just sit there for many years. And we do think there's opportunities later on, whether it be at a fall town meeting or a subsequent date, to do a larger project and spread it through use of bonding, et cetera. So that's the main reason for the removal. So before I go to Newton Street, I'm going to go to Mark first, because he was a big part of that conversation, to see if he or Brian have anything they want to add on that piece.
So Jason, I'll just, I think you covered it pretty well. I think that there's a lot of potential funding options that are out there right now, whether it be complete streets, whether it be ARPA. There's a lot of projects that are already in the queue. You've got the second half of Main Street. You've got the remainder of the work that's being done at St. Mark's and Marlboro Road. And you've got 3 other projects around town which were connected to the same contract as the St. Mark's Marlboro Road work. So it becomes a capacity issue. And I think from a funding perspective, I think it's better to let some of this stuff settle out a little bit before we look at doing something like we're discussing with, multi-year bond or something. And again, I don't know if Brian wants to add anything to that or correct me as to what I got wrong.
No, I'm good. I think you captured exactly what the discussions we had.
Okay. Any questions from the committee on everything before we go to Newton Street? Okay, so then on Newton Street, for those that were on the committee last year, you'll remember very late in the game, right before annual town meeting, Karen came to us and said the Newton Street water main was failing, and she proposed, we went back and forth on whether to do an assessment, like a feasibility study, or whether to fund the whole thing. We ultimately decided on a feasibility, which was funded at the town meeting. And my understanding is Karen will be ready to go with this project and need approval to do it at the spring town meeting. I think we all know this is a cost that is an estimate, right? Yeah, like anything these days. But I think the important part of this is you'll see the price tag. It's not insignificant. It's $2.5 million. I think we spent a lot of time as capital last year understanding the need and understanding that this was always part of the water plan. It was just a different pipe that was part of the water plan at that point in time. So it was always kind of factored into how they were setting the water rates, which is where this would be funded from. But I think the other important thing is my understanding is that there's a significant, by significant, I mean upwards of 800,000, Brian and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, of actual issued bonds related to the Route 9 water main that could be repurposed through town meeting action, of course, to offset this. So it's pretty much funds that are already there and already factored in, but it would take a series of article, and I put plural on there. Mark and Brian, you're gonna have to weigh in there of how that would be done. So there's gonna be no cost next year, because even if we were paying the full thing by the time they got to construction, et cetera, it's gonna be more, we're gonna be authorizing the expenditure. So I think when we get to motions around this, pending getting through any questions here from Mark or Brian, I would probably motion that we'd want to have a further conversation about understanding the funding sources around it, but support the general concept of, including this as the placeholder between now and then, especially given it has absolutely no impact on the general fund, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be scrutinizing and looking at it the same way. So Mark, Brian, did I get anything incorrect on that item?
No, Jason, I think it is a little north of 800,000. And yeah, it probably would, this is a pretty large project. So depending on how Karen structures the project timeline, it may be pushed out several, it could be up to 2 or maybe even 3 fiscal years, depending on how she does it. So just, you can keep that in mind, but that is correct. You're accurate about the that source of bond money from.
I think I'm sorry, Jason, go ahead.
No, wait, Mark.
So I was just going to add to what Brian had said. Again, this was for a Route 9 water main project. And given the bond rates at the time and everything, and the understanding, from Karen, the intention to spend, all of the money, the entire amount was bonded at, upfront, which is something we normally don't do. Normally you wait till the costs are all done and then you do that. So we actually did bond the full amount. We've got, as Brian said, somewhat north of $800,000. But there are limits to what you can reassign the bond proceeds to, and it has to be a similar type of project for a similar length of bond. So it's got to be something, for example, if we bond it for 20 years, it's got to be something that is eligible to be bonded for 20 years. The nice thing is that it was a water project that was originally bonded. We're looking to assign it to another water project, which can be bonded for the same length of time. So it just kind of works for us to be able to do it that way. And as Brian could probably tell you in his history of doing bonding, it doesn't always line up that way. Sometimes you've got to get very creative about how it's going to be used. So I think it's we're in good shape, with it right now to have a project like that on the docket.
Any questions from the committee on Newton Street?
Yeah, so Mark and Brian, I hear you saying that the bond, the transferred bond might be around 800,000. What's the, so there's still, I don't know, a lot of, where's the remainder of the funding going to come from? Is that the general fund? The 2.5 million minus the 800.
Correct. So that's just going to be a new bond, a net bond that will be issued. And then, we've already have the cash for the 800,000. So theoretically, Karen could draw down funds almost immediately, but the rest of the money will have to be drawn down as she proceeds through the project.
So Brian, but I
From the
think
water fund.
general fund of what exactly? Okay, thank you. So water fund. Yeah.
that answer your question, Karen? You got anything else?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what's the part about the water fund, Mark?
So the amount of money that the $800,000 would be applied to the project, as you just said, so say the 2.5 million minus 800,000, the residual is going to have to be paid for from the Water Enterprise Fund.
Okay,
So that would be something that would be effectuated through the rates. Procedurally, I know that the way that the capital budget is normally structured, you've got, one article, we list all the projects. Because this project is going to be the reallocation of previously funded bond money, as well as everything else, I suggested it to Jason, and probably that's the way he'd carry it to the committee at some point, is that it be a separate article, because bond counsel is going to have to get involved in the language for this. So.
okay. So Jason, the difference between 2.5 and 800, so that's what is that, 1.7? Should that be in the water fund column? 1.7 million?
It would, but this is only showing the cost in FY23.
Oh, okay,
Which we're saying based on construction schedules and just the timing of when bonds get issued, based on just watching how Brian does his magic. It takes a year or two for it to actually hit an actual expense for the town. So
okay,
what town meeting would be authorizing, let's just say we had to fund the full 2.5, just to make it easier for a second. Town
Mhm.
meeting would be giving Brian the authorization to bond through a 2/3 vote, and they'd be giving Karen the authorization to do the project out of the water fund. And then at a later date, the bond payments would be known. Of course, Brian can project and do some math on interest rates. He always goes much higher than we end up seeming to get because of our AAA, but that would then factor into not necessarily any of our tax rates, but it would factor into the water rates that if you're a water customer, you pay, that are set by the select board.
okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on Newton Street? All right, does anyone have any holds or objections on anything in DPW? Okay, so I'm gonna move that the capital planning committee support the Northborough Road culvert for 108,000, the utility dump for 95,000, and the mini excavator for 115,000, as presented by the DPW director for inclusion in the 2022 annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Okay, just for full transparency, I'm going to move Newton Street separately, so we can get that right. So any comments or questions on that one? All right, motion's been made and seconded. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
All right, couldn't find the mute button. Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Yes.
Wheeler,
Aye,
and Malinowski's aye. So that is unanimous. I'm going to also move that the capital planning committee support the recommendation of 2.5 million for the Newton Street water main construction, subject to additional conversations around the proper mechanism for reallocating prior bond proceeds and other financing matters. There a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Yes.
Wheeler,
aye.
and Malinowski's aye. All right, any comments or questions on DPW before we move on? Okay. Next is going to be facilities. The changes since John last saw us was he has removed garage doors at the DPW of 50,000. Main rationale for that was that he doesn't think there's an immediate safety or energy need to replace them. If you remember, that's a 3-phase project. I told him, at least my personal opinion was, I'd like to kind of see us go out to bid for that, maybe in and around a fall town meeting if the finances of the town stabilize, to see if we can't do that as one project. But he really did not have a compelling argument to push that one forward. He's conferred with Karen on that, is my understanding as well, given it's our facility. And he's also removed the townhouse office furniture replacement, which was scheduled for 25,000. That was mainly at Mark's recommendation, based on everything we just talked about in terms of town offices potentially being rehoused somewhere else in the mid to near to mid future. So just kind of all that stuff has not been removed. It's all just been pushed back a year for consideration on the next cycle. So any questions on what John removed or Mark removed? Any questions on the items that Jeff has on the screen? I personally struggled with the Corderville ones. I had probably 2 conversations with John, but he is insisting that these are things that just need to be done to the building if they're going to be inhabited for even a couple of years while we work through the grander plan. So, you know, I think it's good that they're separately outlined as specific projects, as opposed to kind of the facilities maintenance fund, which is at kind of on the disposal of the town administrator for, I'll call it one-off unexpected items that no one knows about that are going to happen during the year. But I mean, I just figured I'd throw that out there, that I struggled with it. It's not the largest dollar amount that we have on the piece of paper, but it's not insignificant. I would just, you know, if something accelerates here between now and March, I'll obviously bring it back for the committee to re-examine, but I just couldn't see any scenario where there aren't significant number of people in that building for a couple more years.
Jason, one question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So the repaint the building and the repair a siding, is that being done in-house? Is that what
Yes.
I heard earlier? Okay,
Yes, that's
So
all
that-
materials.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments on facilities? I should have said this at the beginning, but every department head was informed that we were having this discussion tonight. And if we do vote no on anything, they were told they're going to get a chance to kind of come back and advocate for it before we go forward. But, you know, kudos to all of them for having kind of all their ducks in a row and being so responsive. So I just would be remiss to not say that, because I think it's been a pretty smooth process. So seeing nothing on facilities, I will move that we accept the facilities capital projects as presented by the facilities director. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Joe beat you, Karen. You get to do the fire department. All right, so motion's been made and second. Is there any discussion? All right, roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Yes.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So that one is unanimous. Okay, fire department. Here's what's changed on that since the last meeting. You'll remember the chief had a presentation on the all-terrain utility vehicle. He has removed that from consideration for this year. On the side, I have told him I would be more than happy to help him approach Cat McKee and the Trails Committee to just see if there's access to grants. Fire grants don't typically cover these sorts of things. So that's just been pushed back another year. The chief just listed it as one of his lower priorities compared to some of the other items we're going to discuss here. He's also reduced the portable radio SEMA EOC. It used to be 20,000. That's now 14,000. And that was mainly due to some funding that came through in a state earmark in this year's budget. The earmark was larger than 6,000, but he was able to use a piece of it towards his radios. I will just remind the committee that the town already has a commitment from St. Mark's School to pay for 20 out of the 40,000 of the fire PPE. The other 20 was covered by Fay last year, if I remember correctly, but we do not have that commitment, at least in writing yet. So that's why you see it split between general fund and the gift category. And those were the items that the chief changed as part of the email reach out. The other item that he just wanted me to make sure everyone was aware of is the rescue tools for 40,000. They were a subject of last year's FEMA AFG grant. It got to a pretty advanced stage before we got declined. That program has more than doubled in funding this year. So the chief is in the process of resubmitting that. Of course, all awards are by April 1st. So knowing our luck, we'll get a positive letter like 2 days after the annual town meeting. But I thank the chief for being open to resubmitting that grant. And hopefully we get good news from the federal government before annual town meeting, and that can just go away and the department will get what is needed. So any questions on fire?
I had
One,
one
Jason?
question. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Joe.
I had one question. Did they, and this isn't relating directly to the spreadsheet, was the new boat bought by?
It was.
Okay.
It was funded by advisory in the reserve fund in the current fiscal year, and it's been delivered and in service. They did training a while ago. The fastest procurement I've seen in a long time. I don't know how they facilitated that, but the chief had that delivered pretty quickly.
And this, we don't know, is this pickup truck going to be used in tandem with that? Is that part of the use for the pickup truck? Do we know? I can't remember.
He had a whole write-up
Yeah.
in his submission. I would say a pickup truck can be used for a lot of things in the fire service, right? It can be used to tow trailers, but it can also be used day-to-day use. Also in the winter in New England, your hoses freeze. So it doesn't go neatly back onto the truck. So that's another use. I do know based on personal knowledge that truck was actually, the existing pickup truck was out of service when Chief Achilles took over for Chief Morrow 2 to 3 years ago, and he worked to rehab it enough to get it in the service to service the town for another 3 to 4 years. So
Yeah.
I remember that was like day one conversation. I don't know why I
Yeah.
remember that one, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they need it. That's not my interest in that. I was just interested in that, just coincidence.
Yeah, they're not tied together is I guess what I would say. Any questions on fire?
I have one, Jason, if I
Go
may.
ahead.
So none of these expenses can be funded through the Harvard fund for any of this. He has, I'm assuming he must have other things allotted coming out of
I
there.
will defer that to our town administrator.
Mr. Purple.
Looking for the mute button. So I know that the chief has been using Harvard funds to help fund some of the things that he needs to do for accreditation. So really you'd have to go back and take a look and see what might be available for other uses. So I can't say for sure, but I do know that that has been a large portion of the funds.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And just a quick question for you. So the mute button wasn't to mute me, just to be clear. The mute button.
No, I was looking for your unmute button and, so.
I'm joking. Thank you.
I will say the ambulance fund. These Brian and I have a monthly just check in on that, and we track like because there's a lot of lease payments and debt payments that come out of there. Knock on wood, it is having a phenomenal year from a revenue perspective. Hopefully that doesn't mean more people are needing the services because every transport's different, but it's in a lot different position than it was at this time last year. So that is something that is there. I think it's too early to tell whether it'll be available to support anything, but it is something that, at least I know I keep an eye on. I know Brian and Carla are all over it from a finance team perspective. Anything else on fire? Okay. You ready, Karen? I will move that the Capital Planning Committee support the recommendation of the fire chief for the 2022 annual town meeting warrant related to capital items. There's a second.
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Yes.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So that is unanimous. All right. Police Department. This is complicated, but I think we'll get through it. The police cruiser, I hope, is pretty self-explanatory. The chief has one cruiser this year. As a reminder, we had two last year. He's taken delivery on one of two. I'm just going to provide actually an update. He called me. If you recall, we did one SUV and one cruiser last year, like one sedan, and that was due to obviously officer preferences, functionality. In a sedan costs less than an SUV. I think that's pretty. That probably makes sense to a lot of people. Problem is the sedan still hasn't arrived. SUV's been on the road for a few months now, so he is looking at potentially repurposing that prior sedan. I told him to come back to us if it was an issue, but obviously he's now 6 months in to a fiscal year without it hasn't even started to be manufactured at the plant. So that's just more of an FYI. So he clarified for me that he will absolutely be looking for an SUV next year. Karen, these are all Ford Explorer SUVs that are hybrids, so subject to the grant that John Parent gets every year. So we actually may be going from a non-grant eligible vehicle to a grant eligible vehicle. But he still adamantly believed that his one cruiser needed to be replaced. I told him if we were having two cruisers up this year, I'm sure it would be a more robust conversation. But at least my personal view is I don't know how we get out of seeing some of the details that he provided to us when he presented to us a few months ago, how we get away with just skipping a year in any way, shape, or form. So that's the article that's on the table related to the cruisers. So that's not the complicated part. It's just more of a transparency update on the delivery timeline on some of these things. Any questions on the cruiser? Okay.
Well, just one. So the reality is that we're still putting the money up front and passing the funding for the vehicles. We're just not getting them. Pretty much is the situation.
I think, Joe, it's hard to believe that by the end of this fiscal year that the chief won't have that second vehicle. So
Yes.
You're not really putting it up front. I guess in that example, if it were to slip into another fiscal year, then yeah.
So he is expecting that it'll actually get someday.
He's doing what I'd call proactive contingency planning because he can't control what happens in Detroit or wherever that vehicle is being manufactured.
By the way, that was beautifully put. I want to give you some props on that.
Which one? Which part?
The contingency, whatever the three words you strung together right there. Contingency.
Yeah.
Beautifully put.
Okay. All right. So the Taser and body camera program, and Mark and Brian, I haven't had a chance to call you ever since the chief called me, but few things. In the chief's operating budget, he carries a Taser line item. They've always had Tasers for a while now, and that's just north of 10,000 a year. That is in his operating budget this current fiscal year, and it's in what he's already submitted for next fiscal year. The change here is he's exploring a body camera program. There's a lot of policies that would have to go into place, et cetera, but he specifically mentioned and reminded me that he discussed it with us when he did his submission, but also it came out of a discussion that he had with the select board last year related to some of the police reform measures that were out there. but there's clearly, we both agreed there's some more due diligence that needs to be done in terms of the proper way to implement the program, but he's planning to like move forward with, he absolutely needs to move forward with the tasers, and he wants to move forward with the body cameras, but we're in a collective bargaining year, first and foremost. And second, there's a bunch of financing options that are out there for a body camera program. And he did note that most of our neighboring communities are starting to implement. He cited Westboro in particular, that has now implemented a program with some of the at least initial equipment offset by grant funding. So at least my personal view on this one is I'm incredibly supportive of the concept. And I think we're carrying the worst case answer in our capital plan right now. If we were to just absorb this all as a town into a 10-year lease payment on this program, which is, it covers everything. It covers warranties, it covers service plans, storage, anything that would be needed to make the program work and integrated with their tasers. I'm very supportive of the concept. I just think that Brian in particular needs to sit with the chief and the vendor and figure out what the options are and what's the best answer for the town. But I also think that any presentation to the select board should, I know we're changing state reps, but there's still at least a legislative session that will have Representative Dykeman, if I've got that right, Mark? So I just think it's something that is far broader than the town of Southborough. And I struggle with the concept of paying for this all on our own, and have to believe that there are other mechanisms out there, not to fund every penny of it. But really, if you think about it, it's $10,000 to continue a taser program that we've already had. Right now, we're carrying in capital, Chief's carrying his operating, so we're already double counting. That's good. We'll fix that. And we're talking about a $50,000 expense a year that was not in our capital plan related to body cameras, and how that should be funded and whether some of it can be done up front. We've heard the term ARPA already. The chief used that with me in the discussion. So any motion that I would make tonight, and would welcome a motion from anyone else, would be supportive of the concept and supportive of a placeholder, but subject to further refinement to see if we couldn't get that number down. Not that I don't think it's a good idea, but just that I just think there's got to be sources out there. So I'm going to pause, see what people's thoughts are, and then we can take it from there.
And so the 62,695, that's the annual cost. So the 10-year cost is what's it?
Yeah, 10-year lease essentially is what they have framed it. Thoughts, commentary?
I'm certainly on board with you in terms of if this can be brought down in any way. It looks a little more intimidating than it is just because it's all presented at once, loaded up front. If you just added this on a 10-year list as a capital item, it wouldn't look quite as daunting. But yeah, essentially $50,000 a year for cameras. I totally see the need and the desire for it. I think it makes their job safer, and it makes consequences safer too when people are acting out of line. So
Mark, can town meeting enter into a 10-year contract?
So you'd have to do something specifically. I think the way that there's an article we do every year which gives the selectmen and the school committee the ability to enter into contracts that they feel is in the best interest of the town, but we've always capped it at 7 years. But yes, town meeting could enter into something longer. It just gives the school committee and board of selectmen the ability to do it outside of town meeting, but it is capped at 7 years.
Got it. Okay. So I'm gonna move that the capital planning committee support the police chief's recommendation of one cruiser at a cost of approximately 60,000 in the concept of a Taser body camera program, subject to further discussion between the town's finance team and the chief in an official recommendation back to the capital planning committee, advisory committee in select board, with the understanding that we're carrying an amount just 62,695 as a placeholder, as a conservative placeholder for this year's annual town meeting warrant. There a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? So Lisa, I'm gonna just direct my further discussion to you. I think this is a select board item. We can obviously, you tell us whether you need us to come present it, or you can candidly take it on your own. I just think, I think it's unfair to maybe ask the chief to run with that angle of, legislative outreach. Maybe it's something you coordinate on with Mark, but just figure out what our possibilities are. The chief is working with his peers, though, in terms of the Massachusetts police chiefs, to see what they're doing as well. So I think if we can't find that middle ground, I think we'll be able to find a path forward that's hopefully more financially sound, but obviously we're dealing with what we're dealt with right now. Okay, this motion has been made and seconded. Roll call vote. Braccio.
Aye.
Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Shoner.
Yes.
Wheeler.
Aye.
And Malinowski's aye. So that's unanimous. All right. There should be no votes needed the rest of the meeting on capital, but I'm just going to update you on two other departments. Recreation, when they came before us, they had 20,000 for Choate Field design, if you recall. There was some conversation around that. They have subsequently spent 8,500, which is under the capital policy, under the capital threshold, out of the revolving fund, and done it. It's done. It was already presented to Recreation Commission. Watch their last meeting if you want to see it. It was I think the initial number, just so everyone's aware, was a number well north of 2 million for actual construction cost. They, I thought, did a very good job, though, of cautioning that that's not the cost that they would be bringing forward to the taxpayers. They're now trying to figure out what the proper funding could or should be for that. So that's not a this year item, but we don't have to pay for feasibility now, I guess is the bottom line. We were carrying that as a capital expense. That's already been done. So that's good news. The program van is not a general fund item. They're planning to use recreation fund for that. It's a revolving fund that they technically have control over, as long as it doesn't exceed the annual appropriation that town meeting gets it for expenses. However, I did remind them that they need to come back to capital when they're ready with a formal submission so that we can make a recommendation on it. They're just not ready yet because there's no vans to be purchased. So they're kind of building their support in the background, is my understanding. And then they had talked about making in doing some improvements to the Mooney tennis courts, which is at Finn School, related to pickleball. They are intending to seek CPA funding for that. So they have not submitted an application yet to them. My understanding is a very light CPA year, as well in terms of the appropriations that are being looked at there. So we'll see that when it comes across, but there's no need to vote because there's nothing, we don't have the right details to vote on it yet. So I guess the good news is it's not going to be a general fund appropriation. It certainly would be taxpayer money, but coming out of a different article that we would weigh in when we actually have the right details. Any questions? Okay. And then finally, the schools. So what's missing here is everything we just talked about in terms of potential additional design, whether it be for a new school or renovations at Woodward, because that project is very much in its infancy. Consider this, me putting the committee on notice that we would have to have a subsequent conversation But right now, there's no funding expected to actually need to come out of the general fund next year. Because even if we did do a special town meeting to appropriate the funds, you're likely looking at maybe an interest payment, if anything, in FY23 by the time Brian actually bonds it, and we have expenses that are incurred. So the superintendent's supposed to talk to the school committee about proper timing there, but that's missing right now. But again, it's not gonna, really move the needle this year. It certainly will move the needle for future years, which is what capital needs to think about. They also have 2 parking lots that they plan to resurface and redo, mainly due to drainage. They have revolving accounts mainly that come from, I believe it's their extended day programs, but I think there's other revenue sources that go in there as well. They are planning to use that. It is the 175 and the 150 there. It didn't flow across on the total cost, but it is 175 and 150 for those total costs. That is a vote of the school committee. I do think it'd be important to have Greg and Keith in to just talk more holistically about their plan. But I think it'd be important to know where they're going with Neary, because if you look at their current capital plan, there's a lot of what ifs. It's if we do Neary, we do this. If we don't do Neary, we do that. So that's what's on their docket. So those were previously listed as general fund appropriations for this year. So that's why we've really gone down to basically $700,000 here. And that's assuming, I think we've been conservative, like we've overstated probably a few items here. In from a comparison purposes, I think we had almost 1.2 million of appropriations last year out of the general fund related to capital. So year over year, this is going to be a significant drop. So what Brian is working on, I know he came up with a draft today, is I asked for kind of historic schedule, because there's talks on advisory about stabilization of what percentage of the total budget, general fund budget capital has been, looking back 5 years. So I know he was working through some numbers, and we'll have that for our next discussion. But this is going to be I feel very comfortable saying it's going to be much lower than what we've historically paid.
I had a question. So, in other words, these parking lots would go through a different approval source than us to begin with. Would they have to go through town meeting, or can the school
No.
operate independently?
It's school committee only. I would argue it has technically would fall within the town's capital planning policy, but it's a different elected board. So look, I think that this, at least my interactions with the school administration, they've been nothing but collaborative. I candidly drive through the Finn parking lot a lot, and I'm surprised I haven't gotten a flat tire in certain spots, especially on the preschool side. So, but I do think it's worth just, we do it with every other department. I don't think there should be an exception. They've offered to come. I just think we need to find the right time for them to come when they have a full plan, as opposed to, I'm not gonna have them come talk about 2 parking lots that they're not even ready to appropriate yet. Any other questions on this? All right, so the path forward on this is advisory had originally asked to meet on December 15th. And I sent you all an email and an invite. The chair reached out to me. They're having a joint meeting with the BOS on 12/14, and she asked if we'd be open to coming instead on 12/22 to present this. My question, Lisa, is actually for you. How does the select board want to deal with this? In hear this, because obviously you're the sponsor of the article. We obviously want advisory's feedback to factor into any decisions. But this was a pretty light conversation compared to what we had last year. If anyone recalls kind of the difference, because I think the department heads made some tough decisions up front. So I don't know what your thoughts are there, Lisa, before we commit or not commit to the 22nd for advisory.
So our current schedule is we are doing the joint meeting with advisory on the 14th. Depending on what we still have hanging out there, my hope was that the meeting on the 21st, we could potentially forego. So let me talk to Mark some more, Jason, offline, and see. There might be the opportunity. We're not meeting advisory until later than the normal Board of Selectmen meets. So maybe, I don't think there's going to be a ton of discussion around this, but either, the board could participate in the 12/22 meeting if they wanted to, or, we could just do a brief, ask you to do a brief presentation to the board on the 14th.
Okay.
So let me talk to Mark and try to figure out the best way offline
Okay.
is to handle this.
Okay. So what is the committee's preference on 12:15 versus 12:22 for advisory? I think Karen, you had declined 12:15. I think I got accepts from most everyone else. Karen, I think you're on mute.
It's 12:15, not 12:14, right?
Yeah, 12:14 is the BOS meeting. We currently are not scheduled to go to that. Advisory invited us for 12:15, which is what the invite is on your calendar. The advisory chair has proposed that we push it back a week to 12:22 because I think she wants time for her committee to kind of chart its path forward based on the discussion with the select board.
Yeah, I think I could do 12:22, but not the 15th.
Is there anyone that cannot do 12:22? Okay, they meet at 7:30 as well. And I was promised first item on the agenda, absent whatever meeting minutes. So I will tell her we're good for 12:22. And I guess we can go from there. All right. Very quick ongoing capital project updates. The townhouse designer RFQ is out to bid. I don't remember the closing date. John Parent will come back once those come in with next steps. Mark, was the fire department tender contract signed yet?
No, the contract went to the council for review. They had some comments and that is now back with the vendor. So it has not been signed yet.
Okay. I do know the total cost is pennies away from the total authorization from town meeting for the actual vehicle, just so everyone's aware, which will leave no funding to actually equip the truck. So the chief was thinking through that, but just putting everyone notice on where that landed. Library interior renovations, any updates there, Joe?
The short would be they look like they're on pace to finish it's toward the end of January. They've been a little bit slow because of supply chain stuff and labor issues. But they are completing the cabinetry in the center section of that second floor right now, which will then be ADA compliant. So something to check off that list. And they anticipate finishing probably with the carpet in December. And then they anticipate having a small break gap over, the holidays and the busy part and picking up again and getting the rest of it done in January.
Okay. Thank you. Any public comment? All right, we've already discussed meeting schedule, so let's see how it pans out with advisory and BOS. And then I'll come back to everyone on meeting schedule. My guess is our next meeting is going to be around the space needs study. But I need to get broader buy-in on what the select board want their role to be in some of that as well, given the number of departments that they oversee, that may impact. So Lisa, that'll be another conversation for Mark. He kind of has the ball there. Is there any other business anyone wants to conduct? All right, I appreciate everyone bearing in there. I did not have the Patriot schedule open when we scheduled the meeting, but now I remember Jeff gave me a subtle hint. So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, second by Jeff. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Yes.
and Wheeler.
Aye.